Gracious Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here this morning, the early morning. We thank Thee that we can all meet to study Your Word together. We pray that Your Spirit, You will pour it out in latter rain power this morning, that we might be able to discern the wonderful truths that You have for the people of God as we approach the end of this world's history. Bless Brother Pitmajer as he presents these messages this morning, and those who hear. We pray in Jesus' name.
Okay, we're dealing with the history of Esther, and because of that, Brother Michael went in and he looked at the kings in that history, and he came across another revelation of the seven thunders, beginning with Cyrus, Cambyses, Phalsmyrtus, Darius, Xerxes I, Artabanus, and Artaxerxes I. This is the first decree, the second decree, the third decree. The third decree lines up, of course, with the arrival of the third angel's message on October 22nd, 1844, when the seven thunders end in Millerite history. It lines up with the Sunday law when the seven thunders end in our history. There is this Artabanus. You're saying that he only ruled a brief period of time, and he killed Xerxes I.
There's two ways to look at it. Yeah, he usurped the throne. He either killed Darius and then Artaxerxes, or Artaxerxes and then Darius. Not the Darius that we know, but Darius, Artaxerxes, or Xerxes' son. But
okay, Xerxes had a son that was named after him, and he kills both of them, comes to the throne, and then Artaxerxes I kills him. So he's short-lived, not a real big focus in history. Same with Phalsmyrtus. He had usurped the throne.
There was something that I was looking at, and I don't know if it's significant to help us place it from the Midnight Cry to the Sunday Law, because that's how we were placing Cyrus, Darius, Artaxerxes, yesterday, as Cyrus is 9/11, Darius is the Midnight Cry, and Artaxerxes is the Sunday Law. And what I was thinking is that the Phalsmyrtus and Artabanus, they're unique in that they both usurped, and they both only reigned like fractions of the amount of time of the rest of the kings. So I wondered if they were, it's signifying Cyrus is the first step, Cambyses is the second, and the third step is Phalsmyrtus. Yeah, the falling away or something like that.
Artabanus would be that too.
Yeah, they fall right in that spot. That third.
So what we're saying here is that 9/11 here would be a fractal of the seven thunders.
Yeah.
We have been identifying that Cyrus is here, Darius is here in the story of Esther, and Artaxerxes the first is here. So you're saying this illustration of the seven thunders may very well be a fractal of this history that we're looking at with Esther.
A second witness is that we mark Manasseh at 9/11 with the captivity of the children, and there's the fourfold progressive destruction leading to Zedekiah at the Sunday Law.
So in one revelation of the seven thunders, we have Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah, Jehoiahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah, but we also take Manasseh and put him here. Do we? Or we put him here?
We put him there because he forgets, but there was something that he
put him where?
We put him at 1989 because he forgets, but I've also seen it done where Manasseh's put at 9/11 because he marks the fourfold progressive destruction. It's the four abominations that come in from 9/11 to the Sunday Law.
And then we put
the four abominations. Manasseh started.
I'm not.
No, I'm saying I've seen.
But you mean from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry, the four repeat within.
Yeah.
The five wise and five foolish virgins.
Yeah. So it doesn't. We're not denying anything, but it doesn't exactly fit this. But anyway. So we're understanding that, to catch us up, that Xerxes one, right? This is Ahasuerus,
Mm.
okay?
This is this man in the story of Esther.
Esther, yeah. That he's going to call a feast in Esther, and the first feast takes place in the palace. And then this is for 180 days. And then he's going to have a secondary feast in the court, which is the garden,
That's the 7-day feast, right?
7 days.
Court.
And there's going to be a second feast, Midnight Cry doubling, and for 7 days, which is the 7-day feast of Vashti.
Hers was also a 7-day feast.
Yeah, going on during the same period of time. All right, so we're going to see, this is in advance. I'm going to move these, well, I won't. Haman here is hung. And Haman's sons are hung down here as we read through. And there's a feast down here that is the feast of Pur, the feast of deliverance. They're delivered from the enemies. There's a feast here, a double banquet. Double banquet by Esther. We have a feast here.
T.
Where?
You put yours in
Banquet.
Esther, but you, yeah.
And a feast here. 2 feasts here.
Yeah, you have the.
Okay, a double feast there. Where's Brittany? Well, I know she's not.
Madam?
Is she coming?
No.
I missed the feast on the end. What's the feast on the end?
We haven't got to there yet, but
Alright.
that's the Feast of Pur. When the Jews are given permission, there's a decree that there's a lot of decrees in here. Okay, at this level, when you're marking Cyrus, Darius, whatever, and Artaxerxes I, you have the 3 decrees.
This is the feast they have after they are victorious at
But
the end, right?
yeah, but you have a decree here that allows the Jews to defend themselves, and it's got a certain day that they can do this,
That's what I mean. After they defend themselves, then they have the feast at the
and they're victorious.
Right. Okay.
Okay, and
So
Haman's gallows is 50 cubits high, thus marking Pentecost, Sunday law. What else are we forgetting? That here, this is it 3 months that Mordecai has
30 days.
30 days. Okay, Mordecai, you can help me spell this. Mordecai's here. We're going to place Mordecai here. M-O-D-I-E-C-A-I
E-C-A-I. Yeah.
is here. I went over this more than once. One of the things that I'm having a hard time settling into, I certainly see Esther called by Mordecai right here, you know, given the copy of the decree in this history. And then she says, pray for me and fast for me for 3 days. And it almost still seems like she's standing here, the 3 days may be here, but you know that at the end of the 3 days she goes into the king and she receives his robe. That's telling me she wasn't called to the 30 days like Mordecai had participated in, so she's not in the history of the palace. But still, at the end of the 3 days, she's here because she's going to call this double
Is she not
banquet.
asking Mordecai did she not ask Mordecai to fast for her?
Yep.
So is that not his experience from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry? It's just a second.
Yeah, but the thing is she says, fast for me for 3 days,
Yeah.
and then I'll go into the king, and if I perish, I perish. She doubles her I perish right there.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's
But what
evidence
about-
placing her here rather than here.
But the parish is, but what does that have to do with what he just said about him, the 30 days of Mordecai leading
Well,
up?
she's in that experience too. She's asking them to pray. So it's Mordecai and his, who everybody he represents, go ahead and pray and fast to give her strength and courage. But she's going through that same history too,
Yeah.
right? So maybe we can nail that down more clearly. But in any case, if it's this 3 days that they're fasting where she goes into Xerxes and receives the robe, then it's a repeat enlarge that takes her back here. You know she's back here because he repeatedly tells her, I'm going to give you up to half my kingdom. And that's placing you in Herod's feast and the dance of Salome, which we've marked here before in other studies.
It says, "Go ye and fast."
What? Give us the
sorry.
verse in the chapter.
Chapter 4, in verse 16, it says, "Go fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise."
For what? What was the text?
Both explains.
What was the text for what?
4 verse 16.
So that would be more set. That would be Mark in the Midnight Cry, the Sunday law. So
Yeah, well, she gets the robe here.
yeah.
So all I'm
Goes
saying,
back.
then we have to mark this as a repeat and enlarge.
There's a double fast leading to a double feast. I don't know if that is anything, but you see it. Mordecai's fasting.
Mordecai and his group are fasting, and
Her and her maid.
Esther's and her maids are fasting. Double fast. Okay, so yeah, all right.
So is it a double fast or a double feast?
Both. A lot of
There's
doubles in
There's a
here.
double fast, and it leads to a double
But his
feast.
text has no feast in it. It's
No,
double
no, no. I'm
fast.
saying this
Later
this
on.
fast leads
The
to the
text,
point
the
where she
text in
goes.
416 is a double fast.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Is the double fast leads to the point where she comes to Artaxerxes and then invites him to a double feast.
Okay.
And the double fast and the double feast are marked at the same point, so that it has to go to the Sunday law and then repeat with the double banquets.
So this
Back at
is
the midnight.
this is the 3 days of the double fast. Both Mordecai and Esther's group are fasting.
Yeah. So that would be the time of the Midnight Cry.
Okay, so they're fasting through this history, and right here, Esther is allowed to touch the scepter. Okay,
Where at?
right here at the Sunday law,
Okay.
and she receives the robe. But then she goes back to this history. It's repeat and enlarge, and she's going to have the double banquet for Haman. And it's on the second day of the feast where she tells Xerxes about Haman.
I don't get how going back is a repeat and enlarge. How is that?
Because she goes into
Isn't
the
it
king
just-
right here
I
and
know.
touches his scepter and receives his robe, and then the next, he says, ask me what I can do for you. And she says, well, I want to have 2 banquets. She doesn't say it that way, but she says,
Right.
and the 2 banquets are definitely here.
So she just goes back rather than, I don't understand why you call it a repeat and enlarge.
Because she's already moved through this history.
Yeah,
She's
so-
here at the Sunday law.
so-
She's received the robe of
I
righteousness.
understand that, but why is that a repeat and enlarge to go back?
Because the symbols dictate that it's now repeating it.
Okay,
by
the
double
next
banquet.
history she's going to typify is that she's going to ask the king here to do something for her. And he says, okay. She says, okay, I want you to come to a banquet. The banquet has to be here because it's a double banquet. It's not here.
I get all that, but I don't understand why you call it a repeat and enlarge.
Why don't you? What do you call it?
To go back.
It's repeating this history and enlarging upon this history. It's telling us now in this history where it's just taught us that there's a double fast going on. Esther's fasting and Mordecai's fasting in this history that allows her to prevail with the king at the Sunday law. Now it's going to go back to the beginning of this history again, and tell us the dynamics of how Haman traps himself, or how the trap is sprung. So this is repeat and enlarge in the prophetic sense. Is anyone else having a problem understanding this besides Brother Dwayne?
Well, repeat and enlarge usually goes like from 7 to 8 in Daniel. You're taking it and going backwards with it. That's all I'm saying. You're not going forward, you're going back and saying it's repeat and enlarge.
Chapter 8 of Daniel goes back to chapter 7 and repeats and enlarges upon it.
Okay.
It's repeating Daniel chapter 7 and enlarging upon it.
All right.
If you don't have the second testimony of Daniel 8 upon Daniel 7, then it isn't enlarged. That's what repeat and enlarge means.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, to repeat 7, he moves forward to 8 to do the work, to repeat it.
Yeah, but
Right?
prophetically.
But he's going back to enlarge 7, but to do so, he has to go forward into chapter 8 to do it.
That's what happens here, though. She goes from this verse and
You're
the very
not getting
next
repeat
verse.
and enlarge. I get your point, but
I get what you're saying.
it's not about the prophet or Daniel or Esther. It's about the prophetic line. Sister Tanya wants to say something.
I want to point something.
I think you just broke our connection. So I don't know how you get
It's a bad connection, Tanya.
Can you?
You're breaking up.
All right, never mind.
Okay, and if we won't get to it today. Mark will probably get to it before he heads out of town. But we're going to have to deal with the amount of people that get killed and where they get killed when this war of defense takes place. We need to mark the various decrees, but what else do we want to remind ourselves of? Okay, let's do this. Let's go to Daniel 8:2 and tie this in. This is why I was hoping Brittany was here. This is something that she's been working on. Let's do Daniel 8:1 because there may be people watching this that we can't assume understanding all the logic that we already understand. In Daniel 8:1, and you can correct me on what I'm going to say here after I say it, because I'm not defensive about this understanding, but it says in Daniel 8:1, in the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Now, the way I understand it is he has a vision in the 3rd year of Belshazzar that came after that which he's seen in the 1st year of Belshazzar. So if you go back to Daniel 7:1, it says, in the 1st year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and dreams of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea. Okay, so in the 1st year of Belshazzar, Daniel has a vision. But in Daniel 8:1, he's making sure that we connect this second vision of his with that first. It says after that, okay? And in verse 2 of Daniel 8, he says, I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Okay, so what is he seeing here? Are we to understand that when he had the vision, he right then and there is conveyed to Shushan by the river Ulai, or, and this is what we're understanding now, is he seeing within the vision that he has become part of the vision? He sees in the vision, and he sees himself in the palace in Shushan by the river Ulai. And that's what we are understanding, is that he, in this vision, sees that he, Daniel, is part of the vision.
So he's in the palace in the first part of our From 911 to the midnight cry.
So Daniel's got to be in here because this is the palace. So what Daniel 8 is doing, Daniel 7 and 8 are repeated in large. Okay, Daniel 7 is the kingdoms of Bible prophecy with the emphasis of the political manifestations of the kingdoms because they are beasts of prey. Daniel 8 is the same vision, but its emphasis is on the religious manifestation of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy. For the symbols in Daniel 8 are symbols of these kingdoms are portrayed with sanctuary terms and items. So Daniel 7 and 8 go together to give us both the church and state manifestation of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy based upon repeat and enlarged. So Daniel's carrying with him, prophetically, he has with him the testimony of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, both their church state manifestation, and in Daniel 8:2, he's wanting us to understand that his prophetic testimony arrives, I would assume, right here. And the reason that I'm saying right here is why?
Because in the story of Esther, the decrees come from Shushan. And
No, that's probably a valid argument. That's not my assumption.
What was your question again?
Why am I placing him at 9/11 instead of somewhere arbitrarily in here?
You mean Daniel?
Yes. And the reason I'm doing that is upon 2 Chronicles 29. 2 Chronicles 29 gives us a twofold distinction between the temple and the courtyard. So if he's in the palace, he's here, and I'm going to place him at the beginning. Now, why do I place him at the beginning? What were you going to say?
Because in Esther, there's the decrees that are issued in this history. There's 3 of them. They all come from the palace, Shushan. It was Shushan at the palace, and the.
What are the decrees? Do you know them all?
Brittany said them last night. There's a decree from I can't remember what it was.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
think the reason you're doing it is because you've already stated so. It's because it's repeat and enlarge. And chapter 7 is where Daniel begins the vision. That's why you're placing him at 911 rather than in the palace.
Okay, I'm placing him at number 1. This history here is the history of the palace.
Right.
Chapter 10, Mark 2nd Cyrus.
Okay, so then you're looking for another reason. If that's
Okay,
the history of the palace.
Okay, so first point is he's in Shushan in the palace, so he's in this history. And do we want to place him at the end of this history, the beginning of that history? This is what we're dealing with, and Mark is going to give us an argument now here
Well,
in Daniel 10.
it says in
Give us the verses and this.
well, Daniel 8:1 it says in the 3rd year, right? When you
Third year of who? Belshazzar. Okay.
And in Daniel 10:1, it says in the 3rd year again, but this time it is Cyrus, king of Persia, which we've already got marked there.
Cyrus is here.
Yeah,
Why?
because Cyrus marks the first decrees, the first angel.
Okay, so why do we have Cyrus here in the story of Esther? We're dealing with, in the story of Esther, we're dealing with Xerxes, right?
Because these typify the 3 angels, so we're just laying line upon line. That's why.
Okay, so because we're seeing these waymarks here, you're saying this is the first angel's message, second, third, at a broad level.
Yeah.
Therefore, you have Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes.
Yeah.
Therefore, 9/11 has prophetic. It's prophetically upheld that 9/11, among other things, is a symbol of
And
Cyrus.
Daniel 10 is confirming that. Because when you go through, we went through Daniel 10 in class maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's clear that Daniel stood at 9/11 there. All the
Oh yeah, we've taught that for
Yeah,
15 years.
so we're upholding that by that point alone. It's marking 3rd year again, and this time it's
So you're saying because Daniel 8:1 is the 3rd year of Belshazzar and Daniel 10 is the 3rd year of Cyrus that we have the right to put those together?
no, not necessarily, no.
Not necessarily.
No, but I'm just saying that it does mark it there. We know that this is the time period of the 3rd angel. We know that Belshazzar is in. We know that he's in that area because we've already got him marked.
Belshazzar's in this history.
Yeah, because he's marking the foolish virgins. So
Well, one of the things in verse 1 of chapter 10 is the name they mentioned for Daniel is the name given to him by Nebuchadnezzar. If that makes a difference.
Belteshazzar. Well,
That name is,
there's an argument for 9/11
Okay.
because there's a name change.
That's what it was, because he's gone into captivity.
Okay.
But, I mean, that is the name that Nebuchadnezzar gave him, is that right?
Right. But we know he's Daniel, and here he's
So the
Belteshazzar.
scriptures are given both names in that one verse. Daniel and the name he was given.
And when does your name get changed?
At a
So you
covenant.
enter into covenant history.
When you eat the little book, and you eat the little book at 9/11, you enter into covenant.
So just to finish the point I was making about Shushan is that we know that Mordecai comes or sends his messenger from Shushan with the information.
Mordecai here is going to send a copy of the decree to Esther,
Yeah,
and that decree had to be in place beforehand.
it comes from that point, and that point, Shushan is in Elam. And Elam means hidden. So we're marking then the beginning of the hiding starts at the beginning of the 5 months, which is 9/11, where the decree would come from. So
Okay, so
I still don't know how it makes it there, but it seems reasonable. That that's where it
9/11
starts.
here to the midnight cry here at a different line. This is the line of John and Jesus' birth. That Elizabeth, that Zacharias is struck dumb in the sanctuary because he refuses Gabriel's prophetic message. At the same point in time, Elizabeth is going to get impregnated. He's tarrying in the sanctuary, and then the scriptures tell us that
It's 5 and 1, right?
that Elizabeth was in hiding for 5 months.
And Shushan means trumpet
Shushan means trumpet, but it's in the province
of Elam.
Elam, which means hidden.
It's the trumpet for the hidden people.
So, okay, now go back up here. I just wanted to put that in place. What were you
Elam in
saying?
there? Yeah.
So now what I'm saying then is that we mark it at 9/11 Shushan because Shushan means trumpet, and we know the trumpet for the warning about the gathering of God's people from Joel and from Zephaniah comes at 9/11, and it's for those who are in the message, the disciples of 9/11, those who are hidden. So
So the trumpet can be played.
Yeah, but let me finish off his thought that I didn't hear him pull the trigger on. You were starting by trying to tell us why Mordecai gets this decree from this history to send to Esther. What's this got to do with hidden and Elam and Shushan? That's where you started down the road. Because you want to place the decree here.
Mordecai comes out of this history of Shushan and Elam with the decree.
Where's the
And
text
he
of the
gives
decree?
that decree. It's in
For what
verse-
decree?
For the one you're discussing. The
It's-
one he got from the.
I think it's
When
verse
Mordecai
11,
gives to
chapter
her.
4. Verse 11.
Verse 11, chapter 4.
Or it's, yeah, verse 11.
Okay.
Where is the decree? Is it in the middle of the 180 days, the hidden time, or this? This is actually 150 days of the hidden.
No, we know that there's.
Well, that's the
3
180 days of.
Yeah.
Oh, it's verse 8, sorry.
We know that there's 3 decrees.
Okay,
So
here we have a decree marked,
yeah,
the first decree of
that's allowing us
Cyrus.
to lay it over
Okay,
that.
so there's a decree right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Mordecai's, when he's got a decree that he's going to make a copy of and send it to Esther, the decree is at 9/11, based upon Cyrus and the first decree. And based upon, you want to read it? What, 4:9?
Yeah, 4:8.
It's
For
4
eight.
not, it's 4 what?
4:8.
It says also he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan. So the decree was given at Shushan, destroyed them to show it unto Esther and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king and make supplication unto him and make a request before him and for her people.
Okay, so the decree comes out of here, but we're certain it comes out right at 9/11.
And
This is the
remember,
decree.
we made that period from 9/11 to the Midnight Cry, that 30 days, because she says, I have not been called to this 30 days, and so we've been calling 9/11 to the Midnight Cry 30 days. And a thought that I had is that, never mind.
I got a question about the hidden. in verse 2:10, she's told not to show her people, and then it also in verse 2:20.
That doesn't make sense to me. Read the whole verse. 2:10. Who's told not to show her people? And what is she told not to show her?
Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. So they're hidden.
She had not shown what?
That they're
decree?
Jews.
The decree?
No, it's
No, that she's a Jew.
That she's a Jew.
That she's a Jew and her people are Jews. That she's from the Jews. The one that is the subject of Haman's adversarial problem. She's hidden in.
She's hidden in this history.
Well, nevertheless, I'm telling you, it's recorded.
Okay. Yeah, but I'm just saying, we haven't looked at this, and you're right. She's hidden in this history, because this is the second feast where Vashti rebels against the king's command, and so Mordecai sends Esther into the selection process for a new queen, and she hides the fact that she's a Jew.
17 to 18 says, same chapter, Esther 2. It says, and the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. There's also the subject of the virgins in this story.
When does she receive the grace and favor? When does she get selected?
It's verse 17 of chapter 2.
No, but I'm asking up here on this. When does she,
At the Sunday.
at the Sunday law. So where is she hidden?
Right.
In here.
Right. Right.
So this is a different hiding.
But listen to what the text says, because it mentions this hiding again in verse 20, but you got to read it from 17 to 20 to get it. It says, then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast, and made a release to the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. So here's where Mordecai sits in the king's gate.
Right here.
Okay. Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. So that marks the point where Mordecai sits in the gate. And so you're right, it's in that history between the midnight cry and...
We're finding that, like in the 7 last plagues, you're hidden from the wrath of God if you're faithful, and there's a hiding of Moses in the martyrdom that leads up to the close of probation. So now we're seeing that Esther is hidden. The fact that she's a Jewess in this history, she's hidden, but we're dealing with this hidden also.
But this hidden has to do with the name of the place, Elam, which means hidden, right?
Elam means hidden.
Okay.
So in Daniel 10, we know that that's 9/11, and you're saying third year of Cyrus corresponds with third year of Belshazzar in Daniel 8. So we're placing Daniel sees himself. Here is Daniel in the palace of Shushan at 9/11.
That's Daniel 8 verse 2, right?
It's Daniel 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. It's Daniel's testimony.
Daniel, say it again, Daniel what? 7, 8, 10, 11.
It's 7 and 8, and you can't separate chapter 9 from
chapters,
8.
right.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, it's
So this is the beginning of the unfolding of the child's own vision.
yeah. This is Daniel 7 through 12. The whole prophetic testimony of Daniel 7 through 12
But where
is unsealed right here.
But where we can see that is his testimony in 8:2, where he says, "I'm in the palace at Shushan."
Yes,
He's seeing
he
himself.
sees the vision,
Right.
the Chalzon vision connected with the Mare vision, and he sees himself
What does that?
in the palace in Shushan.
What does this have to do with the context of the article I sent you on the Chalzon and the Mare?
I don't know. I haven't thought that one through.
Okay.
To add to the connection between Cyrus in the third year and Belshazzar in the third year, we know Belshazzar's third year is connected to his first year from the context of the first verses of 7 and 8. Well, in verse 21 of chapter 1 of Daniel, it says, and Daniel continued even to the first year of King Cyrus. And we've already determined that the third year and the first year are the same year, just by two systems of reckoning. Because, Daniel wouldn't contradict himself in his own writings. And that's what helps us to place it. And when we placed it at 9/11, so Cyrus.
When's the first year of Cyrus? in what we're looking at up here?
All of it is the first year. From 1989 to 9/11 is the first year.
1989.
Yeah, and to 9/11.
9/11 is the third year, Cyrus.
No. The first year starts at the time of the end and goes all the way until the point where the message is empowered. That's what when we worked it out, that's, as a group, that's what we came to the conclusion of.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The third year's here.
Yes, but the third year is the first year. That's my point. Is that so when we say that Belteshazzar's first year, there's a vision given, and the same vision's given in his third year, it's the same connection between Cyrus's third year is the first year.
Yeah, that's correct. If you look at,
I know what he's
Okay,
But-
the first year of Cyrus is the arrival of the message. The third year of Cyrus is the empowerment of the message. They're the same message,
No,
but
it's
there is
the
a
same-
distinction.
No. I know he's talking about literally. They're marking the same point in time literally. But this is a reason why it's done that way in the Bible. It's not done that way to confuse us. It's marking prophetic symbols.
No, I know that's. I'm saying
Yeah.
prophetically, absolutely. The third year of Cyrus is literally and spiritually his first year of reign. That's the year he reigned.
The arrival and the empowerment of the message,
In the
same message.
in the same year.
Yeah, I get it. I'm not arguing with you. I get it. But they're the same message, but the number 1 and the number 3 is marking two different aspects of that same message. The 1 is the arrival, the 3 is the empowerment.
Okay.
I'm taking it to the prophetic level. We don't do the figures literally.
I was just saying if you
have
brought
to
them
sit in the back of the
together,
class
it
if you
shows
apply
that
the
1
figures
and 3
literally.
are the
All right.
same. So
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
All right. So, okay, so we've nailed this down. Let's go to Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 1.
Again, for Mordecai, where he's at the gate and then she's hidden, and then at the Sunday law, what did you say he does at the Sunday law? You guys go through this stuff so fast you can't even write it down.
You should be here every morning and you'd be right up to speed.
The decrees are the decree for
You're going to rebuke us, we'll rebuke you right back. What?
the 3 decrees, according to Brittany, is the decree for the queen, the decree for the what did she say?
Against the Jews.
Against the Jews, and the decree to protect themselves.
Jews.
Explain that to me. There's 3 decrees in the story of
Esther.
Esther. Okay, there's a decree here of Haman to destroy the Jews.
Yep.
There's a counter decree that they can protect themselves.
Yep.
Right.
And then
then
the other
before
decree is
that-
before that there was a decree.
This is Haman's decree.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure the order because we've already applied the decree for Queen Esther to be queen. He sent
For a
out a
new
decree
queen.
for all the virgins. And that's
Okay, so this is the Sunday law decree of Haman.
A new.
Mhm.
Okay, or the image of and it begins here. There's a counter decree to oppose that. And then you're saying there's a decree here that she's queen.
Or a
That's
decree
out of
for the
order, isn't it?
virgins.
Isn't
Pardon
it?
me?
That's out of order.
Why? You're probably right. Tell me.
For the new queen would be first because Esther's put into place.
When?
And
When is she crowned queen?
I read it this morning.
At the Sunday
at
law,
this,
The church
oh,
right?
Yeah.
She touches his scepter and is given the queenly garments at the Sunday law. So this is Esther's decree. This is the third decree.
I'd like to say something if I'm heard well.
Yeah, continue.
Okay, the word decree, there's 2 types of decree. I looked them.
Oh man.
Nope, you're breaking up. Can't do it. So we're seeing the first decree here, which is Haman's decree to destroy Mordecai and the Jews, right? And here Mordecai is going to make a copy of this decree and inform Esther of it. And Esther's at this point is going to do a double banquet. And at the conclusion of the banqueting in this history, Xerxes too is going to realize that Haman is a bad guy, and there's going to be a second decree put in place that the Jews can defend themselves. Doesn't change the first decree because the laws of the Medes and Persians cannot change. So do we mark the second decree that they can protect themselves here or here?
It would have to be at the Sunday law.
Yeah, it has to come at the end of this process, right? So the second decree is also here. Second decree.
What was your ED 3?
That
Esther's decree.
Esther's decree, which I'm saying is the third decree.
The decree for the virgins to meet the king is what that decree is.
Oh, it's a decree to call the virgins in.
All the virgins in, yeah.
Okay, so that's here.
Yeah.
Cool.
That because they're called into this process.
They don't have to be sequentially in the story once we've placed the prophetic symbols, you know. Because that's the very
That
first
would make
decree.
sense to have 3 decrees like that.
So you want the third decree at the midnight cry?
That's what I'm saying, they don't have to be completely in
It's
order.
not the
Once
third decree, it's just the third in the story, but
So
we already
it's-
showed the
it's what happens at the decree that matters.
And here's the second decree.
okay.
Now, what they are
So,
is the second decree. What? What's the second decree? Let's go. The first decree is to destroy the Jews. This is the decree that, when it's enacted, is going to be the Sunday law crisis. Okay. The second decree.
Where is it? Where is the second one?
The second one is here
No,
where.
he's
No,
asking
no,
the
no,
verse.
I mean in
In the story.
it's in like chapter
because
3 or
it's
2.
wolf, it's
It would help if we knew these things.
When they well we've read up to chapter 6 so far. The second
It's
decree.
in chapter 2. Nope. It has. He sent letters into all the king's provinces and every. This is chapter 1, verse 22.
Read it. Read it all.
For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people.
Yeah, the decrees.
That's a decree to do away with Vashti.
That
Yeah, that's the one to bring in what?
Oh, I didn't realize that's another.
to bring in a new queen.
Is it to bring in a new queen?
No,
Well-
it's to punish Vashti is what it's for
disobeying.
for disobeying.
And when the king's decree, which he, this verse 20, shall be published throughout all his
There's
empire.
four places.
All
There's
the ones.
one in chapter
Okay, let's
1.
read through them carefully, and let's read them without any commentary, and then comment
There's
after
one-
we read them.
There's one in chapter 1 and verse 20. Michael just read the back end of it.
And that's
Let's read it all.
through 22.
It's 2:2 where the virgins are at. That's one we're looking
Let's
for.
read them in order. Chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse what? 20?
20 and 22.
20 and 22?
Well, if you read through to the end, it'll tell you what
Okay.
the decree is for.
It's in chapter 19.
You're breaking up, my sister.
Well, verse 19 says, "Let the royal commandment go from him and
No,
let it be
you're-
written."
Of chapter 1?
Yes.
We don't want to do that. We want to read it in order. 19. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Medes and the Persians, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her a royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both great and small. And the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the words of Memucan. For he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and it should be published according to the language of every people. When did he do that?
It was at
At the end of
the
his feast.
banquet that she refused to come to.
That would be here.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a decree from chapter 1. That's a decree. Chapter 1, verses 19 through 21. Where's another decree?
22.
Chapter 2.
22. Chapter 2. Okay, read it, Mark.
It's verse
In Esther
1.
1:8-2 and in Esther 1:13, the word law is decree actually. Esther 1:8 and Esther 1:13. The drinking was according to the law or the decree. There's 19 verses in Esther that has the word decree in Hebrew.
Oh, she's saying there's a decree during the 180 days where they're to feast.
Whether it's a drink.
Where they're allowed to
And the drinking was according to
Esther 1
the...
8.
See it, but don't know that it's a decree of this history. Maybe there's a rule about
Well,
feasting.
isn't that...
It's the same word.
Yeah.
It's the same
Yeah.
word.
It's
We
something
understand
that's
that,
already
but-
established. Though.
Yeah.
It's not a new
But
decree.
isn't this just a decree about he's going to have a feast?
No, I would argue that it's the guidelines of how you have a feast when you have it that's already in place. They're referring to this is the law of
It's
how you run a
it's according
feast.
to the law. Yeah.
So next decree, that this is a decree in 1:19 through 22 that is in response to Vashti's rebellion. Okay? Now Haman is going to accomplish a decree in this history that Mordecai is going to get a copy of and send to Esther. So where is this decree?
Esther 3 8.
Esther 3:8.
But there's one more that follows Vashti's rebellion decree.
Esther 2 1,
Yeah, Mark
1 through
was back.
3.
Okay,
Let's go to
read that, Mark.
1 through 8. It says, After these things, when the wrath of the king Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what he had done and what was decreed against her. Then
Now,
said-
when did he remember Vashti?
after these,
Right here,
God remembers. That's marked by
Sunday law,
yeah.
Zechariah. But go ahead.
Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hegi, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. I think it's verse 8 it mentions it as well. So it came to pass when the king's commandment and his decree was heard, and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also to the king's house to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the woman.
Verse 10, read verse 10.
Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it. So she's hidden. She's
hidden.
And she's
the
at
second
Shushan
decree.
the palace. She
Okay.
was gathered together
The
at
second
Shushan.
decree, she's hidden.
She's gathered together at the palace, but verse 11 says, And Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did. So Esther's in the court, but it sounds like the gathering of that decree is after the Sunday law.
Why so?
Because it's in response to Vashti's rebellion, a decree is given saying every woman should be in submission to her husband, and then he says, and let's gather together the virgins that I can pick them.
That's because he remembers what he did to Vashti in the first decree, and then you're saying the second decree follows in the same place after he made the first decree.
it's not just a repeat, she's just going back to that.
Going back to what?
Well, I think it's marked by the, is it not marked by the symbol?
I agree with you, but do you see what she's saying? He's arguing that even though the flow of these verses that now in this next decree, which is to gather the virgins together, seems to take place when he remembers, which is the Sunday law, and is in response to Vashti's rebellion, which would be at the Sunday law. But now the selection of the virgin, he's saying, is going to go back into history.
Yeah, because we know that we know that Esther comes and touches the scepter at the third decree, so she has to go through this purification before.
And where's the purification of the virgins?
We just read it.
Where is it?
It's the Levites. It's the
Yeah, but where is it?
midnight cry.
Where is Mordecai walking during this purification
Well, we
process?
read it in the court.
In the court.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the purification process that leads to the selection of Esther. So where does this decree here, the next one, where does it go in place?
You mean the one we just read?
At the midnight cry.
Yeah.
Okay, and what is this? This is the point I'm trying to get to. What is this decree about?
Marriage.
In what sense? What are you asking?
What are they going to do during this purification process? It's a purification process, but what's the king going to do?
They're going to sort through the
He's gonna
virgins
select
How?
They're gathering.
How?
by a purification process.
by whatever one pleases.
It's
the king.
visual. It's the visual test. He's going to check these women out. This is the second test. It's the visual test.
So you're saying that the visual test is tied to the history of the parable of the 10 virgins and the relationship that the virgins have to the message. That's the visual, the living testimony.
Yeah, in the broad fractal of 9/11, Midnight Cry, Sunday Law, you have the first decree of Haman to persecute the Jews. The second decree is the visual test to select the virgins
Okay.
that will put on the robe and touch the scepter here. And the third decree is a pronouncement about
Well, let's
Vashti's rebellion.
The third decree is 3 verse 8.
It's pretty hard to not keep this first decree about every man ruling his own house. It's pretty hard not to have it connected with this one. Right? By
Well, is that not when it gets reinstated? That's what it's going to be.
I kind of see that as well.
Because this is probably the double message. This decree and this decree go together right there.
Well,
Because it's
Yeah,
in
the
that
outcome of-
history, you have a combination of church and state where there's a woman in control of the state, but there's a decree in the prophetic sense. There'd be a decree against that relationship. It's like
That's
no,
the image
that
of the
every
beast
man rules
decree.
the woman, not the woman rules the man. That seems
It's
like it
the
would be
issue.
great.
It's
That's
the
the
issue.
well, yeah, the first decree sets up the situation for the second decree to become possible.
This decree creates this.
No,
If-
I meant this decree here, the first decree about the husband being in charge. It sets the, because we're reading about the decree of, not Haman's decree, but the ones we've been reading is the ones concerning the king.
How many other decrees are there in this story?
There's three.
Well,
There's a
three-
total of 3?
I'm inclined.
We've already found more than 3.
Just mentioned several times. The word decree is mentioned.
I'm arguing here
Haman's decree
that
is,
this decree is a decree and it goes with this decree and they go right there together because this is the doubling.
That makes sense because then she's selected at the Sunday law.
The second decree that I got marked up here, second decree, where he's selecting the virgins, it is the church. It's the internal decree. This decree has to do with the external, about a man ruling his own home. This is the image of the beast test. This is the purification of the 10 virgins.
well, in that case. then-
Internal, external.
If you put it that way, if you move that decree there then, from the first chapter over to, with the midnight cry, then chapter 3 verse 8 is the decree of Haman.
Chapter 3, verse 8.
There's the decree of Haman, and it says, and Haman said unto the king, there's a certain people scattered abroad, let's kill them. He don't want them around, and that's the one you've marked over here under Cyrus.
It has to be this one.
But
Because Mordecai is going to take a copy of this
Yeah,
decree and
that's-
send it into this
that's
history.
okay,
Haman's decree is-
but in the order of events in the story, it's the third place where you find the decree once you begin to start to read the story. And it's the same place where we mark the third woe at 911.
Yeah, so. Good. Yeah, okay.
But why are you calling it the first decree? Because it matches the first decree in the set of the Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes?
I like the way it flows. I don't have a justification for calling it the first decree. What's another decree? I know of another decree. Do you know?
Doesn't, if you place that there,
Pardon me?
it fits well there, but when you place it there, you negate the whole remember aspect. He remembered what he did to Queen Vashti, so you sort of have to throw that aspect of it away.
Don't
Throw
use
it away, but you can't put the emphasis on it anymore.
3:12 through 15.
So, okay, what's 3:12 through 15 say?
That's Haman's decree.
Yeah, Haman's decree, which is carried by Mordecai in chapter 4.
So when's Haman's decree enacted?
No,
In
can you
9/11.
read it?
Read it.
Well, I read the last one. Michael, you want to read it?
Already. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day
What
of the
verse
first
are you in?
month. Oh, verse 12.
3:12 through 15.
13th day of the first month. And it was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. The copy of the writing for a commandment was given in every province, was published unto all people, that they should be ready against that day. The posts went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and the decree was given in Shushan the palace, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed.
Okay, there's a lot in there. But there's a seal mentioned.
This decree is the decree of the seal. It's gonna impact here.
It's the same as the mark.
Yeah, it's the counter,
It's the mark of the beast.
but it's delivered right here in the palace. That's the first decree.
But where it's going to be carried out in our history is at the death decree. This is a death decree.
I mean, this is the day of the Lord. So this decree, the day of the Lord begins here. That's not a denial of that. But isn't there another decree?
What, in here or you mean in the story?
Chapter 4 is the same decree, but chapter 8 is another decree. Chapter 8, verse 14. I'd probably start before that.
What was it, Michael? Chapter what?
Chapter 8, probably starting in verse 10. Does anyone want to read it?
And he wrote the king Ahasuerus' name and sealed it with the king's ring. That's repeated. And sent letters by post on horseback and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews.
That's the number 4.
You mean the number of animals?
Yeah. Horseback riders,
That's
mules,
the same
camels.
one that's in Zechariah 14.
So you're saying that's marking the number 4?
Yes.
Wherein the king granted the Jews, which were in every city, to gather themselves together, and to stand for their life, it's a life and death, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. How far are we reading down to?
You'll see it in verse 14.
Upon one day in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, the copy of the writing of the commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews could be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, that's only 2, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment, and the decree was given at Shushan the palace.
That's marking 9/11.
What's marking 9/11?
What we just read there, this decree, it's given at 9/11 because it's given at Shushan the palace. Okay, so it's given in the palace, but there's a marking of Islam there in verse 10. The horseback, the mules, the camels, and the dromedaries. That's marked in Zechariah 14. Okay, and they're all symbols of Islam. And then Dwayne said there's only 2 marked there. That's marked in the second angel.
Right, where we read the second.
So what was that decree?
The defense decree.
It was the defense
This
of
is
the
the defense
people
decree.
And
that goes into effect at the Sunday.
And it's, yes, yeah.
It's going to be implemented at the Sunday law.
When the same one is, they both go into effect at the same time. You can defend yourself when the assault decree goes, when Haman's decree goes forth.
Yeah.
So this is the 4th decree,
This is the defense decree.
Yeah.
but at 9/11,
Well, there's a warning. There's a warning in it. The third angel's a warning, and it becomes on.
it can't be at 9/11.
No.
are you going to let him get away with saying that this fourth decree was actually launched here before Mordecai takes a copy of the first decree and sends it to Esther, and Esther goes in the double banquet and exposes Haman's evil plots?
You can't. That doesn't matter though, because the flow doesn't matter. There's so many repeat enlarges.
Yeah, but
if you
his
ignore the
argument,
flow-
if I heard him right, was that he's seeing the symbols of Islam. Is not Islam a component here too?
I got a problem there, but did it not come from Shushan the palace?
That's what I was saying. It goes into effect on the same day, and it comes from the same place. That was what my thought was.
You know, if we're
That it's
going
a
to
repeat.
go by what you said before, that
It has to come from the palace.
Yeah, that's why I'm at today. We know that Islam's marked at 9/11. I know that those four symbols are marked at the midnight cry, but I'm not denying that. But we have to do it based upon from the palace, and like Dwayne says.
Okay, so in Zechariah there is an ephod that goes out over the whole earth, and it's a blessing and a curse. So this decree has both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It has the...
I would agree with that, because this, in God's providence, this thing is set up to this also has to do with divinity and humanity, but it has to do with what God is going to accomplish at the Sunday law.
Okay, so is it not that this decree is part of the first decree, if that's what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yes, it has to be.
It's
It's the same decree.
It's the same. It's the warning as this thing is going out. Tell
It's
what's gonna
progressive.
happen. This is a remedy for that decree that's going out. That's going to punish them at the Sunday.
It's a
law.
blessing or a curse.
Yeah.
So this is the same decree.
Yeah. It's the same decree.
Right,
It's
because
not a fourth decree, it's the first decree.
it's tied to the first decree in the
It's a-
sense that
yeah.
this is the remedy for what Haman has been planning.
Okay, so this decree includes both those elements. So is there another decree?
So these decrees are,
Well, how does that make sense? Because they're two separate decrees, though. I don't know if it matters if there's another decree or not, but I don't know. They're separate. They're distinct and
Okay,
separate.
The third.
He made a decree however many days before, and then the plot was exposed, and he's like, "Oh, I screwed
Where
up."
was the plot exposed?
When?
Where?
Oh, where at the? I don't know where. we
In
were.
this history.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So
what was this now?
his argument, which is probably good, is this decree that we're talking about, it's given in the palace.
No, I agree with that. I don't know. They're just separate decrees.
Yeah, but to add to what he's saying, the decrees, when we put the decree there, if we put them both there at 9/11, right, then they're typified by Cyrus, which is the first decree, so they merge together. When you look at the third angel's message that comes from the book of Joel, it gives you both things. It tells you what's going to come, but it also gives you the remedy. So it's telling you both aspects. This is what's going to happen to the unjust. This is what you do to prepare yourself to protect yourself. So they're both in, and they're both marked at 9/11 when they come forth.
No, I totally see them marked at both 9/11. I'm not saying that. They're separate decrees. They're he made a decree, he screwed up, had to make another one, and you can
So
combine them with
it couldn't be
combining
the
work.
same decree based upon line.
The first decree.
But the context says they're separate decrees. I agree with the combining work that they become one, but
They happen at the same
they
time.
happen at the same time. But the first first empowerment and the second arrival aren't the same thing.
What does the decree typify?
The Sunday law.
No, the first decree, Cyrus, it typifies the first angel's message, yeah?
Right.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, no.
within that message are both decrees. So there can only be one. You can't have two decrees there because
Yeah. But,
And the
but
first
like you
angel's
said-
messages are
It is.
all the messages in the first angel's message?
Yes.
Fear God, give him glory, the hour of his judgment.
Yes, it is.
But there's still a distinction that when the first is empowered, the second arrives, knowing that it's all just one angel that comes down in Revelation 18. So that's what you're saying. It's just one decree, but it's got multiple aspects.
Okay, but is there another decree in the story?
So far we've
Yeah.
placed.
What?
To hang Haman's sons.
Ah, is that a decree?
Well, yeah, he wrote it. That's in 9:14.
Yeah.
Okay, so when does Haman's sons get hanged?
At the Sunday law, right?
Uh-uh.
Oh, yeah.
They get hung down here. We haven't read it yet. You read the flow of events. Haman is hung here, but it's down here that they get hung. The 10 kings die down here in the time of the 7 last plagues in that close of probation
I was
time
telling my wife
period.
last night on the way home, at the second banquet where Haman gets fingered by the king now knows what's up. And he's pleading with Vashti, I mean not Vashti, but with Esther, to spare his miserable life. And the king comes in and finds him grabbing on her robes. And so he just takes him out and executes him. He says, take him out and hang him.
So how did he do that?
Was there a decree given for
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
decree.
there's. Wait,
Is there a decree?
Yeah, it
What?
says
Wait,
decree,
nine-
the king's decree.
Yeah.
Where?
9:14.
Yeah.
No. You're talking about the 10 sons.
Yeah.
What are you
What are
He
you
was talking
I'm
about
talking about
the execution of Haman.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
Haman.
right,
It
right.
says, "Let Haman's tent." Okay, so it says, "Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow, also according unto this day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows." And the king commanded to be done. Oh, Haman doesn't he get killed at the same time?
No,
No,
we
no.
already said that. You're
No.
reading from chapter 9. No.
But if you go back to
Go back to where Haman is executed, and that's in chapter 7, verse 7. It says, "And the king arising from the banquet." Where's the banquet at?
At midnight.
it's in the court.
It's in here. It's in this history here. "And the king arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath went into the palace garden, and Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. And he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereon Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbonah, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman hath made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. When was he hung? He was hung right here, the Sunday law, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Is
how
there a
did-
decree?
No,
No, what is it?
or just does it.
Pardon me?
I don't know
It-
what you
Second
call
day
it.
of the banquet.
second day of the banquet?
Yeah,
she said.
the climax of the banquet. It's a 3-day banquet.
So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he.
Why did they hang him? Did Esther say hang him?
No, the king did.
So the king spoke.
Yeah, according to his word.
What is the speaking of a nation?
Legislation.
Legislation.
It's an action of the legislative and judicial authorities. Here the king speaks. That's a decree. It's an action of the legislative and judicial authorities. Right here's another decree. He decreed to hang Haman on the 50th cubit on Pentecost at the Sunday law.
So what does that say then about the
Wouldn't that-
Sunday law itself in respects to it's against those who are keep the commandments of God, but yet Haman is hung in the same decree. So what are we saying?
I was just about to say.
Mark of the beast. And why, what is this issue about the mark of the beast? It's about fornication
It's the
between
message of John
fornication between the church and the state.
Right.
Okay, so what is Xerxes' wrath about? Where is it?
It's the
What-
indignation.
He sees Haman where?
In Esther's
On
bed.
the bed of Esther. Okay, and he's inferring that he was trying to commit fornication with her. So you got the element
Right.
of the combination of church and state, and you got the king speaking.
Right. But then in that sense, then the king represents not Ahasuerus. Then represents Christ in the story. He's recognizing that there's an unlawful union between Haman and Esther, and he's coming down to prevent this thing, not to.
Okay.
Well, you gotta be careful with that, you said, because then you make Esther the bad guy.
No, it's prevented.
No, I know, but you said there'd be an unlawful union. Esther's not even. She's not even like going that way.
No, but nevertheless, the people of God are being coerced by Haman at the Sunday law.
Of course.
They're being Haman's plan was to carry this thing out, but You know,
So but
I-
let's
Isaiah
just mark,
said-
let's mark one thing first here. You got this decree, and we're saying both elements are in it: the blessing and the curse.
This is the vision that Brittany was talking about last night. How do we show the vision is for many days? That this is the Chazon vision being fulfilled there at the third decree.
Okay, and then we have the second and third decree, which are what?
There.
Gather in the virgins,
and purification.
in the purification, and what's the other decree? The selection of Esther.
Yeah, the rejection of Vashti and the selection, or no, the wives honoring their husbands and the selection of the virgins.
Okay, so that's this. This is the second
The third
decree.
The third is
We've got the new queen, the Jews against the Jews decree, and then the Jews to protect themselves.
And then I'm arguing that the fact that Xerxes speaks here and produces the death of Haman, that this also is a decree. This is Revelation 13:11. This is the United States speaking. But the United States also forces the world to set up an image of the beast, and down here, Haman's 10 sons are going to die on this same gallows.
I have now. There's one more place.
so the 10
where it
sons
looks
represent
like,
the 10 kings.
Yep.
there's one more
the
place
dragon.
where it looks like there's a decree, and I don't know if it's. If
What's
it's
the verse?
It's in 9 verse 30 and 31, 32, verse 30, 32. But okay, it says, and he sent letters into all the Jews to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus with the words of peace and truth to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according to Mordecai the Jew, and Esther the queen had enjoined them. And as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed the matters of the fastings and their cry, and the decree of Esther was confirmed these confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written upon the book. So it's not the decree to protect yourself, but it's a decree to keep a commemorative feast throughout your generations of this Purim when you were delivered. So there's another, that's the last decree. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so let's go to, in our last few minutes, a component that we have not put into this, and let's at least read through it, because this is an important component when okay, so we should read chapters 5 and 6, but we only have 10 minutes. Pardon me, Esther. Okay. I wanted to get to the point where we could discuss how Xerxes comes to understand that Mordecai's a good guy in advance of Haman being exposed. You really need to put in chapter 5 to get the context of it, but let's read chapter 6 because of time. There's 14 verses. Let's do 2 verses each. Chapter 6, it says, let's read them all. There's 28 verses if we do chapter 5 and 6. I'll start in chapter 5, verse 1. Now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. We're saying this is the Sunday law. He saw her in the court during the purification process.
So this is in the court.
Yeah, it's here. She's
Okay.
touched Sunday law. Next 2 verses, Sister Tara Marie.
Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be given thee to the half of the kingdom. Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him.
So what is that? That's repeated in large. It's dropping back to Herod's feast where he gives Salome up to half his kingdom. Okay, she's there. Brother Mark.
Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed.
How many people came to the kingdom, to the banquet of Esther? Two.
Well, there was two.
Esther's there, but two guests.
Right.
Okay, this is the doubling. Go ahead, brother.
One of the things
Got
you missed there, this is a banquet of wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said.
Sister Laverne?
Then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up, nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife.
What does his wife's name mean? Anybody know?
Nothing that we found. Or did we find something?
I thought it was gold.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, gold?
Misery.
Misery. That's a good name.
No, there was a
Poor Haman's married to misery, huh? Brother David, next two verses.
Mercy.
Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king into the banquet that she had prepared, but myself, and tomorrow am I visited unto her.
Uninvited.
Also. Oh, I invited unto her also with the king. Yet all this.
No, that's Dwayne.
Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's table.
King's gate.
Now misery is going to speak. Then said Jareth his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak. This is Jezebel, man.
Yeah.
And tomorrow speak unto.
No, it isn't Jezebel.
Well, but she's just like her.
Yeah, that's right. It's the image of the beast. This is
Yeah.
apostate Protestantism,
Right.
speaking to the civil aspect
That's
of the
right.
United States.
Right.
Haman.
Right. So that means when the United States speaks, it's speaking for the papacy.
Yeah, it's the image
Right.
of the beast.
Because it says, speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily, oh boy, with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Oh man, he's going to swing on his own gallows.
This is the image of the beast test. Now, next chapter, Brother Michael.
On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay a hand on the king Ahasuerus. How many again?
2.
And the king said, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. For the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him.
Where is this now? Where are they at now? In the court, where Haman is going to speak to the king. He's come in. It's not in the palace, it's in the court. Is that what they're telling
Haman's in here.
me? Okay, all right.
And the king's servant said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to himself?
And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head.
Well, this is the triumphal entry.
And
That would be in that same history.
delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that there may array the man withal, who the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai, the Jew that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast.
This says a lot about the ignorance of the civil power and what it's getting itself into.
But this is a triumphal entry.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's also, it's exactly what happened to Solomon. David said, go get Solomon, get my mule, and put him on a mule and weigh him and send him into Jerusalem. That's how I understand where they knew that Christ, when Christ came into Jerusalem, it was because of this.
Right.
Yeah, so who's Haman in this?
Lazarus.
Lazarus.
That's got to be, yeah.
This is the counterfeit Lazarus.
Right.
Okay, but what is it? When the king is reading the Chronicles, what is he reading?
He's reading the
book of Moses.
No. The book of records of the Chronicles. And he's reading the history of the kings.
No.
I forgot.
He what?
I'm getting the history wrong.
He's reading the decrees.
Okay, I'm saying no, like I really know for sure, but I'm pretty sure, but I won't argue if you want to correct me. This is Millerite history. This is the second angel's message from the Millerite history. Babylon is fallen, it's fallen. There's a repetition of this very history right here, and the Lord is going to honor the one that understands the Millerite history. Those two bad guys, that's Babylon is fallen, that is the record of the proclamation of the second angel's message in their history, the midnight cry. And Xerxes II is saying, where are we going to honor those that were faithful in that history? Because the fall of Babylon in the Millerite history was not complete. It meets its perfect fulfillment right here.
Okay, but so you're saying then that this scheme of these two guys that Mordecai informed the king about sets the king up this night. The king can't sleep. I already recognize that there's something about the king. He's not asleep during the time of the parable of the 10 virgins. Something arouses the king, so he's not asleep.
So he's woke up at midnight.
He's woke up at midnight.
And what's the light that is associated with the waking up in the middle of the night?
The parable of the 10 virgins.
It's the midnight cry.
It's the midnight cry.
Which is the empowerment of the second angel's message. These two bad guys. Was there anyone in the past that recognized that these two guys were bad and gave a warning to the king? The Millerites.
That's Mordecai.
Yes, that's Millerite history. You got two verses, Sister Christy, because we're running over.
What, 9 and 10?
11 and 12.
Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning and having his head covered.
Brother Tyler.
And Haman showed Zareth his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Told everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zareth his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jew, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but
Babylon is fallen,
but shall surely fall before him.
It's mentioned twice. And
while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared.
And Haman brings his wise men around him, but they're not wise men. They're fools. This is the counterfeit midnight cry.
Yep. Well, that's actually, you call it that, but it's the history of the wise and the foolish virgins in the time between the midnight cry and the Sunday law, where they're given bad advice. And, and Haman's going to be hung on his gallows at the Sunday law.
So these two bad guys are...
I mean, the two bad guys that were going to kill the king.
Yeah. They're the two false prophets in this history. And Mordecai was the one that recognized them in his history as illustrated in Millerite history.
Slow down, because we talked not last night, but the week before, we talked about the false prophets and Balaam, and we identified who they were. So they're one of the bad guys in this story.
Okay, tell me what you're talking about.
We identified that those, I don't have it with me, but we identified those that
Just keep talking, it'll click on for somebody.
all right, it should click on for you. You're the one that presented it. It's 2 Peter chapter 2. Let me read it.
Oh, yeah, at prayer meeting.
At prayer meetings, 2 Peter chapter 2. These are the men that are covetous, right?
Yep, that's what Haman is.
So they're one of the bad two men.
Yep.
All right. So who's the other one?
I don't know.
It would have to be.
It's always doubled in here. It can be Hophni and Phinehas. It can be the prophets of Baal and the priest of the groves.
It's doubled, but I would suggest that it's the work that's going on in secret by the political leaders and the church leaders that are forming the image to the beast.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that one. Church and state, corrupt church and state. I like it. Brother Michael, can you pray?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day and for opening up your word to us, helping us to understand a little better the story of Esther and the things that we need to understand for this time. Please forgive us for our sins, Lord, and I ask that you go with us and direct our feet that we may not falter. In Jesus' name.